I came across an old WCW Magazine article that I thought you guys would be interested in. When Mortis made his debut in the company, we weren't told a terrible lot about him. There was one promo on WCW Saturday Night where Vandenberg talked about finding Mortis in Taipei and how he added Mortis to his collection of curious oddities. But the promo was brief and it didn't really do much to explore the Mortis character. It's actually a bit frustrating because a gimmick like this really does need a huge elaborate backstory so he or she portraying the character doesn't get lost in the shuffle. I mean, take Kane for example. Kane's origin story and the stuff about the funeral home made the Big Red Machine a much more interesting TV character, and it made you care a whole lot more about his matches against his older brother. You look at what WCW did with Mortis, Wrath, Glacier and the whole Blood Runs Cold thing, and if you were only watching Nitro every week, you'd really have no idea why these guys were fighting each other and what each guy was trying to achieve. There was really no motivation on TV except I don't like you and you don't like me. So this old magazine article I was talking about, I was surprised to find out that the guys writing the WCW magazine took it upon themselves to really flesh out the Mortis character, and I couldn't help but think that this is all stuff that really should have made it to TV. Some bits actually were. Those who watched the aforementioned WCW Saturday Night promo will most definitely be able to link up a few pieces from the magazine to what was said on TV, but after reading the article, you most definitely get a better understanding of the Mortis character who, as a side note, I thought had a ton of potential. The mask looked great, the whole presentation of Mortis was really well done, and you had an excellent in-ring performer portraying the gimmick who innovated inside the ring. So let's look at the article in today's video, and hopefully you too will feel like you know the Mortis character a bit more when we're done. And just before we begin, shout out to the WCW Worldwide site for the excellent high quality magazine scans. Throw the guy $1 on Patreon and you can download tons of these classic WCW magazines to enjoy in your free time. There is no stranger bird in the nest than Mortis. Well, maybe James Vandenberg. Or maybe Wrath. Shoot, this trio of terror is made for one another. Mortis, Vandenberg and Wrath have invaded WCW with a morbid mentality that makes the boys at Bellevue look normal. Let's start with Vandenberg, whose professional dress masks a man who is a piece of bread shy of a sandwich. Vandenberg has either spent too much time in the sun, or maybe just not been out in public for, years. This bearded nut is warped to say the least. He's a collector of curious oddities whose interest in the esoteric led him to take a job at the Museum of Medical Abnormality in Taipei. He was the museum's original curator, thus led him to tales of a tremendous athlete who applied his trade in the underground fighting pits in Malaysia, Singapore and Taipei. Alright, so first of all, this was touched upon in WCW, but that's one of the main problems. It was only touched upon. The Vandenberg character must have seen some incredibly weird and disturbing stuff if he worked in a museum filled with medical abnormalities. Such museums do actually exist, of course, such as the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia and Museum Vrolijk in the Netherlands. And as for Taipei, yeah, there's the Museum of Medical Humanities, though it doesn't really look or sound all that dark or twisted. Keep it kayfabe though, brother. As far as we know, Vandenberg saw some disturbing stuff and he began curating this disturbing stuff from all over the world. He heard stories about someone who partook in underground fighting in Malaysia, Singapore and Taipei. A quick Google regarding unsanctioned fighting in East Asia shows us that it still goes on to this very day. So if you hardasses want to prove yourself, head over to Taiwan and see how well you do. I was immediately impressed after watching him fight and I procured his services, Vandenberg said. I found out that this man, who I later came to know as Mortis, had been a pro wrestler in the past and had been shackled by the rules and limitations placed on him by the various governing bodies. Furthermore, he found his thirst for violence could only be quenched by participating in the forbidden blood sports. I like this. I like the fact that Chris Kanyon's previous work in pro wrestling got a mention. So what we can take away from this is that Kanyon was actually a badass who felt tied down by pro wrestling and the rules surrounding pro wrestling. He wanted to absolutely destroy his opponents. He had no time to wear stupid hats on TV while portraying a dumb gimmick. So he left the business because he wanted more violence. See what I mean? Why didn't they elaborate all this on TV? Sure, this article could be nothing more than mere fantasy booking by a very imaginative magazine writer, but it's already 20 times better than what we got on TV. Yep, they're the perfect pair. Vandenberg and Mortis journeyed south to the seedy underbelly of humanity in Southeast Asia, where Mortis became feared and undefeated. In fact, in Rangoon, the capital of Burma, Vandenberg said, "To even whisper Mortis's name could be a cause for a man to have his tongue chopped off by law." Sorry, we didn't test this claim, we'll take his word to be true. Again, I absolutely love it. Even saying the name Mortis was enough to get you in serious trouble. No one was allowed to speak his name. No one was allowed to mention this master of the forbidden blood sports, he who should not be named. In Hanoi, Mortis reportedly became prominent by defeating the legendary Sun Tai, a victory that earned him extensive media coverage and the monetary prize of 750,000 dong. I looked this up and I can't find a fighter named Sun Tai. Sun Tai Chi was a hybrid fighting style created by some dude named Grandmaster Sun Lu Tang, but I am out of my depth here and I'm just getting random information from Google. It is kinda funny though, someone heard of Sun Tai Chi and they maybe just assumed that the guy who created the fighting style was named Sun Tai, but who knows. From there, the two travelled to Kuala Lumpur, specifically 32 Koru Bu Haru Street, where the ancient art of Yi Zong, aka human cockfighting, is held. Right, this is more stuff I have to look up just to satisfy my curiosity. I'm not trying to prove the writers wrong or anything, and I get it, it's a kayfabe wrestling story. I just want to know if the backstory is factually accurate. The street name brings up absolutely nothing, and as for the ancient art of Yi Zong, again, I've got nothing, chief. I think they're making things up. Again, it's nothing to get annoyed about, just don't use WCW Magazine to educate yourself on human cockfighting. It was there where Mortis earned many Malaysian dollars and countless victories. He remained undefeated, including a victory over the Great Tanah Merah, the previous Malaysian champion. Yeah, Tanah Merah is a geographical region in Singapore. Good job, lads. A Confucius priest then declared Mortis a Grand Master of the forbidden art of Kampar. A Confucius? That's not a word. Someone who confuses people? I think they're referring to Chinese philosopher Confucius, and I guess someone who followed the ways of Confucius is a Confucianist? Forbidden art of Kampar? Yeah, Kampar is a town in Perak, Malaysia. Either the grammar's a bit off here or they're just taking the piss. There was no competition left to defeat, so when we discovered an individual, an old nemesis by the name of Glacier wrestling in WCW, we travelled back to the United States, Vandenberg said. I don't want to reveal much of our game plan for Glacier because, think about it, no general's going to let the enemy know his plan. Alright, old Frosty Balls Glacier does get covered quite a lot here, but something gets revealed later on that I'm 99% sure wasn't spoken about at all on WCW television. We'll get to that in just a moment. Suffice it to say, Mortis had a score to settle with Glacier. We all have skeletons in our closet. I am Glacier's, Mortis said. Added Vandenberg, the beauty of this situation is, we know everything there is to know about Glacier, yet he knows absolutely nothing about us. If we were to let Glacier know why Mortis wants him, he might be able to figure out how to counter the attack, and we're not that stupid. Mortis and Glacier battled on May 18th in Charlotte, North Carolina as part of the Slamboree pay-per-view. It was a rematch of their uncensored battle, won by Glacier. The situation at Uncensored was like this, Vandenberg said. It reminded me of a military conflict where on one side is considered to be the victor, yet there's no consideration given for the fact that the so-called victor may have encountered more battle damage than the so-called loser. That means the so-called winner may have had more holes burst into his armour and his morale may have been crushed like the head of a puppy under a Sherman tank. At Uncensored, Glacier gained ground with his meaningless and questionable pinfall victory, but it was Mortis who inflicted the long-term damage. He attacked Glacier with the precision of a surgeon armed with an ice pick. In no way was your ineptitude more apparent than in the fact that you were left flat on your back like a baby seal who had just been clubbed over the head. Mortis added, I walked from the ring, he was carried from the ring. Thanks of course to a monster of a man called to the ring by Vandenberg. We later learned his name, Wrath. Yep, he certainly is fit for the frantic ways of Mortis and Vandenberg. Yeah, for those who may not remember, the Wrath character made his debut at Uncensored 97. Glacier defeated Mortis after nailing him with a cryonic kick, and after the bout, Wrath came down to give our chilly friend a beating. Glacier took the death penalty, and the big man looked pretty damn intimidating when all was said and done. Unlike Glacier, Mortis is not just a mere martial artist. He is capable of every fighting skill, Vandenberg began. Also, unlike Glacier, Mortis is not concerned with belts, honour, duty, pride, dignity and all that crap. Mortis is a pit fighter, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. That means that he beats people up for a living. There's nothing pretty or honourable about it. That means if he has to break your leg, that's what he's gonna do. If he has to rip your ear off, he'll do that. If he has to gouge your eye out, he'll do that too. This is interesting. Vandenberg flat out said that Mortis had no desire to win championship belts. No one involved in Blood Runs Cold won any championships in WCW through the whole duration of the ill-fated storyline. It's like these guys were on a little island to themselves and they were more or less cut off from all other WCW competitors bar a few job guys and a few tag teams. I believe there was never ever any plans to put any kind of titles on these guys, though I also think Mortis and Wrath could have been good tag team champions. A lot of wasted potential right here, but remember WCW in 1997, it was all about the NWO. The 6'5", 252 pound Mortis, hailing from parts unknown, also, as of press time, is now in possession of Glacier's prized headgear which he earned while training in Japan. Vandenberg and Mortis stole Glacier's crown. Yeah, so this happened on the 21st of April 1997 episode of Nitro. Glacier wrestled a match against Cyclope, a match that Glacier won, and then Wrath made his way down the ramp. Glacier didn't see Mortis coming into the ring from behind, and Mortis would perform a super kick that knocked Glacier out cold. Yeah, out cold. As Wrath continued the beatdown, Mortis grabbed Glacier's helmet, he then presented it to Vandenberg, and Vandenberg had a lot of interest in the crappy looking headwear. Taking the helmet was what you might call an act of emotional terrorism, Vandenberg said. I happen to know what Glacier went through to get that helmet and I know how much it means to him. That helmet means more to him than anything on earth. That's why our possession of it is so sweet, because we didn't just take a helmet, we took a piece of his very soul. Mortis added, Glacier, you want the helmet? I have the helmet, come and get it. Said Glacier, Vandenberg has his reasons as to why he wants the helmet, I have mine, and they are totally different. But at the same time, we both have a huge interest in the helmet. I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to retain that helmet because it was passed down to me from my master. To me, the helmet is priceless. It's got incredible sentimental value and it's my responsibility to pass it along. A helmet of this nature could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, I don't know if that's the reason Vandenberg wants it. Instead, I think he just wants it because it belongs to me, just to be a deeper thorn in my side. Vandenberg would not reveal his plans for the helmet, but did hint it would make a beautiful flower pot. He added that Mortis was cheated out of the helmet years ago. Vandenberg would not elaborate. Right, stop right there and keep that in mind. Mortis was cheated out of the helmet years ago. There's something else a bit later on that kind of marries up to this, and I think we were going to learn a lot more about Glacier, Mortis and the helmet had WCW not given up on the storyline. We can kind of put two and two together and come up with a very plausible theory, but more on that in a minute. That's the main issue here really. This storyline got cut off early because WCW had trouble expanding on the Blood Runs Cold universe, but I do think you're going to agree with my theory a bit later on. It's almost too obvious. Personally, I think manager is a vulgar term. I am a collector. Mortis, of course, is the crowning jewel in my collection. Glacier, on the other hand, is a pimple on the face of wrestling, Vandenberg said. Everyone wants to know what are the specifics of my arrangement with Mortis. Well, suffice it to say, that is information of a personal nature. To those who it doesn't concern, it's an exercise in vanity, and it destroys the freedom which mystery permits. And how can we forget about Wrath? A near 7-footer with an attitude of pain and a threshold to endure pounding from several at once. He was unavailable for comment, and Vandenberg was, as usual, quite selective in talking about his powerful protege. Let's just say he's on a need-to-know basis. And right now, all you need to know is that Wrath shares a common goal with Mortis and myself: the total destruction of that slow-moving block of ice known as Glacier. This is disappointing. We know even less about Wrath than what we do about Mortis and Glacier. I always thought Wrath was a harder sell than the other two guys just because we knew him so well as Atom Bomb. You may think we already knew who Chris Kanyon was, but Mortis had the benefit of wearing a mask. Again, see Kane for details. Glacier's been limited in his comments to the media about Mortis, perhaps just because he truly has no clue about the Warped One's real identity. If so, Mortis clearly has the advantage in this feud. He knows what to look for in Glacier, what do you expect, when do you expect it, etc. It's safe to say I despise Mortis and Vandenberg, but I have to give Mortis credit. He is one tough customer, Glacier said. It seems like everywhere I appear to wrestle, regardless of who I'm wrestling against, they appear as well. I guess they feel it's their obligation to come out and lay it into me, pound me into the ground. Like, say, the first Monday Nitro in May from Lakeland, when Mortis whipped Glacier 5 times with his wooden camper wamper stick. Is what? Camper wamper stick? What the hell? This was the most painful, humiliating scene to date, Glacier said. Yeah, I'd feel pretty embarrassed too if someone beat me with their camper wamper stick. To go back and watch the videotape of that Nitro is pretty tough. There I am, draped over the top rope, held in position that made me helpless and knowing that there was nothing I could do about it. I know a lot of people are probably saying, why don't you get someone to watch your back? Well, that shall go unanswered for now, at least for right now. I don't want to say anything that might tip them off as to what I've got planned, but obviously I can't go on fighting them 3-on-1. Those odds, with the firepower they possess, make it nearly impossible. Let's leave it at this: I've taken steps to have my back watched in the future. Okay, so maybe the magazine writers weren't left totally in the dark as it pertains to storylines happening on TV. This is some serious foreshadowing here, and we can confidently say that this article was written before Slamboree 97 because at that pay-per-view, Glacier did indeed receive some backup, and that backup was Ernest the Cat Miller. I'm actually happy to see this mentioned in the magazine because it gives it a bit more credibility in terms of storyline. I mean, Sun Tai Chi and camper wamper sticks aside, we now know that the writers were at least somewhat in the know in regards to creative. Glacier's offense has been under the gun of late. Print media has been blasting it, as well as select TV markets. Yeah, and folks retroactively covering WCW on YouTube. Why, they say, does he retain his open-handed tactics whereas Mortis is using closed fists? Glacier said the answer is simple: tradition and stupidity. As a youngster, I was taught martial arts in Japan, and the most versatile and lethal way to use the hands is with an open-handed attack because you have so many more alternatives. That's why I normally fight like that, said Glacier. Oh sure, I can slip from time to time and fight the closed-fisted American way, but it doesn't happen too often. Mortis rarely speaks. He basically just paced behind Vandenberg during this interview, chiming in with a word of wisdom from time to time. And obviously, by the number of quotes attributed to him, it wasn't too often. Why doesn't he talk? Has he had troubles with the media in the past? Has he been misquoted in the past? Or is it just a simple case of wanting to let his actions speak louder than his words? The truth is, we really have no idea. He wouldn't comment on that subject, neither would Vandenberg. As for Mortis's colourful, skull-filled outfit, well, it's been reported that while competing in the underground fighting pit in Southeast Asia, he saw and did things that caused him to have a morbid sense of humour and a dark sense of fashion. We didn't want to ask exactly what that meant. Again, this is something I like. Mortis wasn't just a spooky dude for the sake of being a spooky dude. He chose his outfit out of his weird sense of humour and his darker fashion sense. I prefer this over some crazy supernatural explanation or just no explanation at all. It makes Mortis seem a bit more human. Vandenberg is nothing but a sick, demented individual who enjoys seeing others in pain, emotional and physical pain, Glacier said. Mortis claims to have studied alongside me, perhaps somewhere in Japan, but I don't recognise him. And there it is, folks. Mortis studied alongside Glacier, meaning they both attended the same martial arts school in Japan. The helmet that Mortis was apparently cheated out of? Well, remember that the helmet was given to Glacier from his master. So my theory is that Mortis felt he was the better student, yet Sensei thought Glacier was the better student. Mortis felt ripped off, and that's what could have started their rivalry. Perhaps Mortis was the better student, maybe Glacier did somehow cheat and he's not all who he says he was, but there would have been so much to explore here and so many paths this could have went down. A real shame too, because the lack of overall substance and lack of explanations was what hurt this storyline as a whole. It just became Mortal Kombat in a wrestling ring. Glacier continues. A lot of people have asked, how come you can't tell who it is? Well, the answer is simple. When I studied in Japan, it was a long time ago. I've changed a lot emotionally and physically, and I'm sure he's changed a lot as well. Frankly, I don't recognize him or his movements, and I really don't know what I've done for this man to have so much hate toward me. But he's not the first person to be jealous or have ill feelings toward me. I've had to deal with that for a long time. The story was being set up here for sure. Again, it's a shame it wasn't fully explored. Glacier's summer-long hype last year hasn't been forgotten by Vandenberg and co, nor has Glacier's amazing high-tech ring introduction. Those are, in fact, part of Vandenberg's beef with Glacier. It makes me want to vomit every time Glacier comes out of the ring. The snow's falling, the lasers are shooting, he has a 3-minute introduction, yet Mortis, the master of the forbidden blood sports, is lucky to get any TV time at all, Vandenberg barked. Obviously, we know who kisses up to the WCW TV production crew. There's obviously a conspiracy within WCW to keep Mortis down, and Glacier obviously is playing a big part in it. Perhaps someday, and hopefully soon, WCW will redirect all of its money, time and effort set aside for Glacier to a truly deserving fighter, Mortis. Well, now you know a bit more about Mortis, and isn't it a sin that this wasn't covered a bit more on TV? All these guys needed was a bit more time on the mic, and they could have had something here for sure. I know it's fun to rip on the Blood Runs Cold stuff, and God knows I've done my fair share of it too, but this whole story needed to be told on the mic, and I wouldn't have minded some insane and silly vignettes too. As mentioned earlier though, it was all about the NWO. Bischoff found a winning formula, or a temporary winning formula as the case may be, and Blood Runs Cold no longer aligned with his reality-based philosophy of wrestling booking anymore. Mortis though will always be one of my favourite characters during this particular era of WCW, and I've always been strangely interested in where Blood Runs Cold could have went or what could have been. But unfortunately, the harsh reality is there was never no long-term plans put in place. A consistent theme when it comes to WCW in the mid to late 90s. Thanks for watching folks, I hope you enjoyed this one, and please take care.